Hi, welcome back to Brooksy's Bass Corner. Today I have a very special interview for you with the one, the only, John Taylor of Duran Duran. Before I go any further, if you're enjoying the reviews and videos on the channel, please hit the subscribe button below, hit the notification bell so that you get notified when I release new videos, and please give us a thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it. This is a special interview for me. My bass story is a tale of two Johns, John Deacon of Queen, John Taylor of Duran Duran. Without either of those guys, I wouldn't be a bass player. The interview took place back in July 2015, about 2 months before the release of Paper Gods. I hope you enjoy it. What was the reaction like from the crowds? You haven't been on tour for a couple of years, so.
Well, it tends to be, it's always good. I mean,
Okay.
I mean, they like, these big open air crowds. They like hits. They hear songs they know.
Sure.
I think they like to hear songs they know, or they like a spectacle. So
Of course.
And the shows we've been doing, we're really just getting the machine
Yep.
moving again. We're not playing. We played the single at a outdoor performance in London a week or so ago, but we're not sort of we haven't built the album show yet.
Sure.
We're just sort of getting the engine turning over.
Okay. And what's it like getting back out there? Because it's been a few
Well, you know
years.
what? We never stop playing live, really.
Mhm.
One of the things that has changed in the business is the amount of corporate shows that come along.
Okay.
We make ourselves quite available for corporate shows. It's the only way we can sustain 2 years in the studio.
Sure. Yep.
The idea that we would just be working in the studio for 2 years on composition,
Yeah.
without actually playing out. Occasionally, we kill each other.
Yeah.
So it's actually, we try, maybe every 6 weeks,
Yeah.
and we'll go and play. We'll just go and take it for a spin.
That's good. That's good.
So it doesn't feel like I've been away from the stage for
Oh, that's good.
a lengthy period of time.
That's good. I actually know Dom. Dom and I used to play together in various sort of covers bands and what have you, and he kind of always says the same, the Duran machine kind of sits there and it might be parked, but get back in the driving seat and away it goes.
Yeah, exactly.
I've had a copy of the new album that I've been listening to last night. Great job. Sounds.
The whole entire album.
Yeah. We got a stream from Warner Brothers last night that we were allowed to hear. And it just sounds great. Okay, on the new album, 2 of the top producers in the world. How inspiring is that for you to work with them? Again, because you've worked with both of them obviously in the past, and you're kind of continuing that relationship.
Well, I should explain a little bit. Mark and Niall co-produced 2 of the songs on the album.
Right.
We'd begun the sessions with Mark at the helm, and he decided after a few weeks that this was not, he was not prepared to commit the same kind of time
Oh, okay.
on this album as he committed to on All You Need Is Now.
Right.
So Mark went away, and leaving us to our own devices for a while.
Okay.
We brought in we took a journey. Most significant producer that came on board was Mr. Hudson
Right.
from Birmingham, who's worked with Kanye West and
Yep.
Jay-Z, a phenomenal talent who really got the thing moving.
Mm-hmm.
Towards the end of the project, towards the end of the project last summer,
Yeah.
I came back and said, look, I really want to do something. How about we call Niall?
Yeah.
He had known Niall all his life, but had never been in the studio with him. So that was a very exciting proposition.
Yeah, sure.
So, we just had to get everybody's schedules online. We actually did 3 days at Mark's studio in London. And, it was the creative, it was one of the creative high points of the recording.
Cool.
And, from a bass player, from somebody who really modeled the bass playing style of Bernard Edwards.
Yeah.
I've said this a couple of times since. I'll say it again. for bass player. You know, I work with a number of producers and engineers, you know, over time in the studio, and they'll often say, when we're at a loose end or we're not quite sure what to do, they'll say, well, play something funky. And,
that's your get out of jail card.
That usually means the session isn't going very well.
Yeah.
And we don't really know what we're doing. I usually respond by going, what does that mean? All I can say is with Niall, I parked myself very close to him in the studio, and we found a groove. And, you know, and I just tracked him. You know, I just close to him, and before I knew it, I was playing the funkiest shit I'd played in a long time. And you know, and I found, I mean, the whole album defining the attitude of bass has been a real challenge. It's been one of the biggest challenges of the album.
Okay.
And I would say that on the one hand, you've got the player, you know, who's trying to, you know, and you know, I've always been a 4-string player, but really, you know, so you've got, you know, holding on to the character of the 4-string bass guitar, you know, I mean, Jesus, you know, we're like, you know, 6 months into this album, and I win some award and something online saying the best bass player ever. I'm in the studio that day with the guys and Mark, and we're struggling to find something. And somebody jokes and says, "Hey, best bass player in the world."
Exactly.
I mean, no pressure or anything, you know, because you know it's just not the real world when you're in the studio. It's just something, you know, you're facing challenges. So you know, the challenge was to find a way that the bass guitar could speak. But you know, I'm very aware that, you know, I look down the popular music charts, let's say, and you know, and there's a lot of that music that I like. You know, I mean, I tend to, for inspiration, I'll listen to Motown, I'll listen to Beatles. But you know, if I'm listening to inspiring 21st century music, I mean, it might be a fucking Pitbull track.
Sure.
Chances are it's not going to have bass guitar on it.
Very true.
So we are looking to make music that works on that level.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, our remit. You know, we're a pop band. You know, God forbid. You know.
What does pop mean anymore?
You know, exactly. You know, so we. I don't know. I mean, I just found it. You know, I kind of surrendered to that. I mean, Hudson, he brought in an awareness of sub. Has he been working with, you know, a lot of hip hop artists?
Sure.
So he had a kind of awareness. He knew how to place that, but then we had to sort of place it with the bass guitar as well. There was a couple of songs that we said, you know what, we might have started with bass guitar, and we ended up, you know, getting the Moog out, you know, and just
okay.
You know, so it was so there was a number of challenges that you know, sort of like aesthetic, conceptual challenges, nothing to do with songwriting.
Yeah.
So that were running throughout the process of the recording.
Okay.
And a big one was the bass.
Yep.
You know, and how do we make bass that is John Taylor?
Yep.
That is contemporary.
Sure.
You know.
Yep.
That, you know, that sort of, you know, that doesn't stand, you know, that can stand up against.
Yeah, sure.
The
well,
rest of what's out there.
Yeah. Did the band?
You know,
I was going to say,
and I know that was a really long-winded.
No, that's good.
Working with Mark and Niall, but I think with Niall, all of that thinking on the 2 days we did with Niall, all of that thinking kind of took a holiday, and we just went for a very funky kind of, you know, funky rhythm, old school rhythm section vibe. And so it was almost like a vacation from the sort of overthinking of, you know, what do we do with the bass? When we were in the studio with Niall, it was I just had to play my ass off.
Cool. Is that? Are we talking about Butterfly Girl?
Talking about what?
Butterfly Girl, the song on the album.
No. We're talking about Pressure Off.
Pressure Off. Okay.
Pressure Off. That's the single, and that's a really, you know, Niall-driven track. Butterfly Girl actually is more like what happens when Duran tried to cop the Chic thing, but it's not bass guitar on that track.
Ah, okay, interesting. I was actually going to say that led on to my other question after that, which was, would Mark and Niall inspire you in your bass playing and the ideas that you personally come up with, as opposed to the band saying, why don't you try this, why don't you try that? Do they push you to be good? And also, do the band do that? Do you feel that there's sometimes the band are like, well, come on, come up, you can do this? And does that sometimes happen?
No, it's the producers, it's the outsiders that really push us.
Okay.
We have a fairly laissez-faire relationship with each other.
Mm-hmm.
We have these long-term relationships that need to be maintained.
Right.
So we tend not to. We sort of have this like, well, you do what you feel, Johnny. Do what you feel,
Mm.
And but the producers, whether it's Mark or Ben, or Josh, but primarily Mark and Ben. Niall took degree, but Mark and Ben are sort of both intellectual producers, and they're both really, really, they'll want you trying lots and lots of different things, and when you're ready to go home or put the bass down, they're going to push you on.
Right.
And that definitely is a sign of a great bass player, of a great producer.
Mm.
Niall has never really been like that. I feel that I've never sweat. I feel like I've never worried in Niall's company.
Mm-hmm.
Studio. He has a great way of making everything feel kind of cool.
Okay.
Whatever you're doing, and he has a great way of taking what you're doing and sort of saying, I mean, I don't know, man. He's never made me feel, less than a really good player.
Okay. Do you think part of that might have been the fact that Bernard kind of took you under his wing as well, and maybe had his sort of stamp of authentication, if you like?
I think it is, man. I just think he has such an extraordinarily Catholic view of music.
Okay.
That and his confidence in his talents as a producer is that he can make anything cool.
Yeah. And he's doing very well with it.
So that he's not searching for the unknown chord.
Mm-hmm.
Mark is like the opposite. Mark will stroke his chin for days while you're coming up with, how about this, master? Do you like this? Niall's the first thing out of your mouth, Niall goes, that sounds like the shit to me.
Mm.
And that's his train. He's coming from a different, he's coming from the 70s where shit was fast.
Yeah.
And you just went with the energy,
Okay.
And it was really, I have to say, it was really refreshing to spend a couple of days like that, in the midst of what became a two-year project.
Yeah, absolutely. The album kind of continues where All You Need Is Now left off, and I can hear big elements of Liberty in the Wedding album. Not so much in the sounds, but just the way some of the songs are sort of coming across. There's a lot of distorted bass work and some synth bass work obviously on there. Was that intentional from the start, or did that just develop as the songs kind of progressed?
Yeah. I mean, each song had a different requirement, and and as we are, when we're writing a song, the bass might be integral from the beginning. So there was no shaking it off. But, if a song came out of a chord progression, and maybe there wasn't bass in at the beginning, then it became more of a broader question. Okay, what do we do with the bass?
Mm-hmm.
Well, where are we going with the sound, with the track? Is it, are we going down the EDM? Is it EDM? Do we want a hip hop backbeat, or is it kind of we going for a sort of a 70s, I don't know, a punk vibe, what are we looking for here?
Mm.
And the way that we tend to write, it's we're writing a song on the one hand, but we're building a track on the other.
Okay.
So, these two things move together simultaneously.
Mm.
We don't, and I think probably we've, maybe because we don't have a permanent guitar player anymore,
Mm-hmm.
but the kind of the sound of Duran is very open-ended.
Yeah.
It can be almost anything. particularly now the way technology plays
Mm-hmm.
part. You know, the first few albums, we were that old school band where everybody holds down their own corner.
Yep.
And it's like, and you could write a song like Save a Prayer in the studio, you know, in rehearsal, and that's it. And
Yeah.
you take it into the studio, and that's how you record it, and that's what the song is. You know, now it's not like that. It's like we try to maintain. I mean, I like the idea that we get a lot of our initial energy from jams. I mean, you know, we did a few days at the beginning of the sessions at Dom's studio in Wandsworth. And you know, and you know, we're always going for energy when we play together. And you're hoping that those could provide a blueprint, you know, a tempo map, nothing else.
Yeah.
But it gives you an energy. But more and more, this album really, you know, more and more, it's all about post-production. You know, that's not really it, but it's all about manipulation. The computer really drove this album in a way that none of our previous albums had been done before. And, you know, you have to have a lot of patience for that. You know, I'm restless. I like to finish now. And, you know, but I just had to, Hello?
Hi, yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I've got you.
Okay. But, you know, just had to accept that that's the process now, you know, that we work at.
Okay. Some of the actual bass lines of, to me, as a fan, they sound very classic Duran. Face for Today is a prime example of that. I pulled a bass out last night and started playing along with some of the songs, and certain bass parts felt quite familiar to me. Do you work to, personally, do you work to maintain that sort of Duran stamp when you're coming up with your parts?
Well, you know, Face for Today, I mean, Face for Today, you know, it's electronic bass on the verse.
Okay.
The chorus is played, but it's cut up and turned upside down and reversed in places. So it's like I could not have played that. Well, first of all, I could not have played it ever. I would not have played it, you know, 20 years ago. But had Pro Tools existed 20 years ago, maybe something approximating that would have happened.
Yeah.
And yes, I think that, you know, so yes, you're always looking for, okay, well, what's classic about Duran? What's great about the sound? You know, what's enduring about the vibe of the band? And how can we put a new spin on it? How can we, you got a song like Dancephobia where we're imitating Daft Punk, imitating Duran Duran.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of all over. It's kind of all over the map. But that's the fun of it in a way.
Yeah.
That you get to just do anything. I mean, we've tried over the years. Trust me, we've tried to replicate we've tried to rewrite Rio.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work. It can't be done. And you know, and once you get over the idea that it can't be done, you've got to move forward.
Sure.
I mean, I'm nostalgic, you know, and I'm nostalgic particularly about other people's music. You know, I don't particularly want to go back to our 80s, but I can live in the Beatles catalogue, you know, today, you know, not come out.
Yeah.
But you know, we have to keep moving forward. We have to, because you can't go back.
No.
So, you know, you've got to, like, in a way, you kind of have to embrace what's out there.
Yeah.
And not be a Luddite.
No,
you and it's tricky.
Yeah.
It's particularly tricky. I mean, like, Nick has so much fun with it. I mean, he loves it. Because it's like his thing hasn't really changed that much.
I guess not. It's just...
They're just different modules.
Yeah, smaller boxes.
Different knobs that he's twiddling. You know, different, you know. But I mean, for me, it's like I've got this 4-string piece of wood around my neck.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to integrate it into a sound that is continually evolving. And Roger, you know, it's the same with the drums too.
Yep.
Shit, you know, Dom will tell you it's the same with the guitar because you know it's like you can make it's easy to make a complete fucking track out of samples and voice today, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, having said that, I don't entirely believe in that. And I don't believe in, you know, we mentioned earlier, I talked about, who did I mention? Pitbull, right? Did I mention Pitbull?
Yes, you did.
Right. So Pitbull is like, I mean, there's that one song of Pitbull's with Neo. That to me is like a fucking Big Mac hamburger. I fucking, you know, I can put it on in the car. I fucking love the way the bass sounds, the drum sound. It's like instant vibe. Will I be listening to it in 10 years? Very doubtful.
Yep.
You know, so I'm a guy who really believes in what happens when, you know, a bunch of different musicians get together and they meld, and they mesh their notes, and they mesh their voices, and they mesh their sounds, and then, you know, and it creates something, you know, compelling. I mean, I'm still a believer in that. So, you know, on the one hand, we're also waging a war against the machine.
Still 30 years on, because this was all rife back in the early 80s, wasn't it? Everyone, all the bass players were worried, you know, how are we going to compete? But we're still here.
Yeah, and I mean, you know what? Maybe the bass will go, the electric bass will go the way of the cello. You know,
perhaps.
Whatever that means. You know, which means that every night in every, you know, everywhere in the world, people will be going to hear people play electric bass.
Oh,
you know, but at the same time, it's like, you know, the zeitgeist, the musical zeitgeist, and the way that it's changing.
Yeah.
You know, and also you don't get the same, you know, and I'm sure there's a lot of readers out there that, you know, this is exactly where these people live. But, you know, when I was a teenager, you know, it was very clear to me, you picked your lane, you know, you be a guitar player, a keyboard player, maybe, you know, a bass player, a drummer, vocalist. That was it. Yeah. Those were the choices, you know. And I kind of came to my own decision. My personality led me to make my change, my choice. But now, you know, like the guys that made up Duran Duran, I mean, who knows? Nick would have been a programmer, you know, maybe would never have got in a band. You know, Simon, maybe he would have just worked with a producer, and maybe he would have just had Simon Le Bon, you know, or he would have had some kind of Pet Shop Boys kind of thing. Sure. But just with like him and a programmer. Yeah. You know, it's like who would have? Would you really get a drummer in today? Well, I like drums live. Of course. Know, for me, it's like, but then you do go to see some artists with, you know, some artists make it work without drums. I mean, who'd have guessed that? You know? Yeah. I remember going to see Public Enemy at Brooksy Academy, and they didn't have a drummer.
No, that's right.
They were really fucking exciting. And they just had this guy on with turntables on a riser at the back, and I'm like, how the fuck is this working? And of course it sounded phenomenal. Yeah. You know, because you had that kind of super compression. I mean, hip-hop's changed. Hip-hop and EDM made life so difficult for the for the professional musician.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, you know, I mean, I yeah. You know,
I do. I totally get you. I totally get you.
It's not for the sake of heart, is it?
No, absolutely. And I actually, leading on from that, if I go into I'll try and keep the bass questions not too technical, but what you're saying there, do you find yourself looking for different ways through gear, through pedals, through rack mounts to try and come up with sounds that you can integrate into what you're doing?
To be honest, all the effects are in the computer. So right. I'm really just like, I'm sitting with the engineer, with the programmer, and I'm saying, what if we filter it? What if we do that? And I mean, he's almost one step ahead of me as well. Okay. I'm playing something, and he's like, give me a minute with this. You know, he's going to try things because we're all working together. Yeah. You know, I might play something, and Nick might say, well, what about if it's, you know, if we sidechain it with the bass drum, you know, and see what, you know, well, okay, that could be interesting, you know. I mean, like sidechaining is like everybody's doing that in EDM, you know, what's it like on real instruments? I mean, there's all sorts of things that you could do. I tend to give a pure signal into the rig. Okay. You know,
so when it comes to doing the gigs and the tour, will you go out and start looking at pedals that you might use to replicate things? Because I know you used to use like an octaver, and obviously you've got...
Yeah. Well, I've still got that basic. I mean, I've got a basic. I've got a TC
Right.
pedal now,
Okay.
which basically does the same thing as all what I had a few years ago, where I had different pedals in. But really, the challenge for me taking this out to the stage is I've got to play Moog on 3 or 4 songs.
Right.
And, what does that mean? Well, I mean, I'm not a terribly good keyboard player.
But you've done it on Red Carpet Massacre on those shows, so...
Yeah.
You'll be able to bluff your way through.
Yeah, I'll fix that.
Have you got any new basses with you this time? I know you had the Say bass on the last album and tour.
Yeah, I use that on a lot of this album.
Okay. What led you to Martin Peterson's door?
What's that?
What led you to Martin Peterson's door? He's the guy that makes the Say basses. Was that someone that suggested them to you, or had you met Martin before?
Frank, who used to Sphere Studios, actually.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love that. I mean, that's, I mean, I've got my TVs. TVs are like my,
Your go-tos.
I don't want to, like, push, when I just want to, like, get in the car and drive, that's the TVs. If I feel like if I want to if I need something a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
then to say, it's a much, it's got a wider range. It's got, the way the action works, it requires a much more hands-on kind of, it's a much more dynamic instrument.
Okay.
I've got a Fender bass that I used on a lot of tracks.
Okay.
And actually, I've got an SB. I actually went back and used the Aria SB 1000. I had one of those that I used on a couple of songs. Actually, our engineer really liked that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I honestly forget which songs were on what. Aria sent me made a new bass actually while we were doing.
Interesting.
While we're doing it, I mean, I kind of like the idea. I always like the idea of like, using, like, telling story in the show, and having different instruments from different periods.
Mm-hmm.
But then I just get out there, and there's so much to think about.
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
you're thinking of the show, aren't you?
At the start of the show.
Yeah.
And let it go, I mean, Dom's the other side of the stage. He's like swapping guitars in between each number. Oh, God. I don't have to do that. And I just get lazy in a way. I mean, it's not really laziness. It's just the efficacy of the show, And
sure.
It's like, does it really, there's certain choices you've got to make. It's like, is that really one that is going to make the show? Is it going to justify bullshit, doing it? So, eventually I end up going back to the B-line.
Yep. Okay. Can I ask you, do you have Bernard Edwards' Spectre bass?
No.
Ah, someone led me to believe you might have. No worries. And I know obviously you've got his Stingray, which I hope you're looking after.
Yeah, well, I've got the Music Man. And I've got a BC Rich of his, actually, that I say it was of his. I mean, it was sold to me as his. I mean, who knows? I've got, who knows? I'm going to take it. It's looking at me right now. I look at it as his bass.
Okay.
I mean, I've got the Music Man.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Those artifacts.
Absolutely. Can I ask you a question about Steve Ferroni? I started playing bass. Actually, seeing you at Wembley in '87 was my first gig, and I took up bass about 4 months afterwards. And Steve's drumming, obviously, he was only on that album and a little bit of Big Thing. But to me, and obviously I'm just growing up, and you're out there doing it. He seemed at the time, for the '86 album and the '87 tour, such a good foil for you and your playing, because the band had changed. Your approach to playing was different. The band had a horn section in it on the tour. Did you learn a lot from him?
Well, I remember the first time I was in the power station, and I heard Steve playing on Mick Jagger's first solo album.
Right.
And I thought he was phenomenal. And I've been working with Tony, and you know, I always used to say Ferroni was like Tony with time.
Wow.
You know, he had the big sound, but there was a steadiness to him. You know, that you didn't get with Tony, and I needed a steady player. You know, especially then.
Yes.
You know, I was all over the place. So you know, Steve was definitely on my, you know, he was on my wish list. And when Roger decided not to return, you know, for Notorious, you know, I felt Steve was the man. I mean, you know, we learned a lot from him in the studio. I mean, he gave us a lot. I mean, he could make a song like Skin Trade, which is a really very slow. I mean, he can make a song of a very low tempo swing. You know, I mean, sometimes, you know, some worked, some didn't. You know, I mean, we were like, in a way, we kind of lost a little bit of that sort of younger energy, that, you know, that kind of like spunky energy.
Sure.
Yeah. You know, it was like we were kind of, Notorious Band was kind of like half the funky punk band that come up from Birmingham, you know, 5-6 years earlier, and then it was half kind of New York session thing, you know, and it was, you know, I mean, look, it got us through that. It got us through that, that period. I mean, I love Steve. I mean, he's a phenomenal musician, a great guy.
But in terms of working as a rhythm section, did he sort of open your eyes to certain things at all? Because obviously Roger was quite a different kind of drummer.
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, rather like I said, now I think we've got to wrap it up. But, and rather like Niall, you know, tremendous confidence that comes from his playing, you know, you get that from when you have that level of I mean, you know, Steve is an incredibly groovy player. He's a very confident. I mean, he taught me. He was like, I remember him talking about, you know, Duke Ellington's band, Sonny. You know, Duke Ellington's drummer, and playing me stuff and listening to the tunes, the kick drums, and you know, we talked about the Payback. That was a you know, big song of his, and how you know, just the steadiness. I mean, yeah, he was a phenomenal player, you know.
Well, thank you.
And it hurt me to let Eric Clapton have it, but you know.
Of course.
I remember I was in Mr. Chow's in London, and Eric was in there with his bass with Nathan.
Nathan, yeah.
And they came over to me, and they said, you know, how would you feel about, you know, how would you feel if we called Steve, you know? And I'm like, hey, sure, no problem.
Yeah. And you're stamping your foot.
And that was that.
Yeah.
You know?
That's the end of that.
But yeah.
Well, look, thank you so much for your time.
You know, the thing is, it's all about finding the meeting of the minds, you know, and Roger's my guy, you know, and I'm his guy. And, like, we can kind of, like, you know, I mean, I can get on his nerves sometimes, but essentially we work at the same speed.
Yeah.
You know?
Is that one of the happiest things for you since the band reformed in the early 2000s, that you and Roger have kind of been able to sort of join up again?
Yeah, definitely.
Because when
Sorry, but we need to wrap it up. Please.
No problem.
Okay.
Thank you, John. I'll see you in December at the O2.
Thanks, Mike.
Take care. All the best, John.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.